Welcome back to the VQT experience. I want to talk a little bit in this segment about the millennial generation, Generation Y, those who were born between 1980 and 1995, and the newest Generation Z, those born between 1996 and 2010. Millennials have, at this juncture, spent at least half of their lives with internet and social media as a prominent, if not primary, source of information and communication. Members of the newest generation, Generation Z, have spent almost all of their lives in the information age. This presents some unique challenges that I have been watching develop in my therapy practice. I've seen a steady increase in Generation Y and Zers who are getting more and more uncomfortable with real-time and face-to-face conversations. And when you stop and think about it, the climate they have grown up in, it just makes sense to me. Think about what happens in a real-time conversation, either face-to-face or phone or even FaceTime, as opposed to a virtual conversation, texting, posting, tweeting, or chatting. In real-time conversations, one has to learn to field questions and formulate responses immediately in a fluid motion. Virtual conversations, on the other hand, provide a convenient time delay, which can literally last as long as one desires. While this may not sound like a big difference at first blush, it creates a significant impact on my practice on the back end. Allow me to explain. I think we would all agree that the prospect of going to therapy is a bit daunting for most people. Even as a baby boomer, yes, I was born in 1961 if you're doing the math, I found it to be intimidating. I didn't know what was going to be asked, how I was going to answer the questions, what the therapist was going to think of me. It was anxiety-provoking. But I had the advantage of spending the first 40 years of my life negotiating only real-life and real-time conversations. We didn't have texting or the internet. For me, and for those of my generation, a real-time conversation is just second nature. But think about how that changes when the primary mode of communication is not happening in real time or face-to-face. Now, texting really came of age in the early 2000s, and by 2007, it officially surpassed telephone calls as the primary mode of communication in America. In the 10 years since then, we've been chatting, tweeting, posting, Instagramming, and Snapchatting, all as evolved, popular ways to communicate with other people. And what these alternative ways all have in common is a time delay in communication. And this time delay has literally changed everything. Beyond the convenience of being able to send a text just about any time or anywhere you want and retrieve those messages when one has time, lies a more subtle advantage of texting, tweeting, posting, and snapping. The opportunity to think about and craft your answer, whatever it's going to be, or time to think about whether or not you even want to respond. In real life, real-time conversations, including phone and FaceTime, one simply doesn't have those options. Now, I have made this discovery through conversations I've had with dozens of my own actual clients. As a baby boomer, I might never have put two and two together until my YZ clients began cluing me in. They experience an inordinate level of anxiety when they're faced with real-time conversations because they literally are not good at formulating responses in real time. They don't know what to say. The more I studied this phenomenon, the more I realized just how many skills one has to master in real-time conversations that just don't get practiced in virtual conversations. If I'm fielding a question in real time, I don't have the luxury of taking my time formulating the answer and then rereading it before I hit send. I respond on the fly. And whatever I say, intelligent sounding or not, is out there. And if someone asks me a question that I don't really want to answer, I have highly developed ways to dodge the question and keep the conversation rolling without actually saying, you know what, I don't want to answer that. These skills are conspicuously absent from a virtual conversation because they're really not needed. You have all the time you need to hone your answer before you hit send. You can dodge the question completely, by simply not responding. And you can even manipulate the conversation by how long you take to respond. These are all things that would be impossible, or at least at best very awkward, in a real-time conversation. The result is that wise ears tend to avoid real-time and phone conversations whenever they can. Now sure, most have learned to adapt when amongst their friends, but even at that, those conversations are very different from what I grew up with. I never could have envisioned sitting in a room with my friends, hanging out, but really saying very little, as everyone in the room has a phone and is paying more attention to the side conversations on their phone or their Facebook posts. It's almost surreal, but that's exactly what's happening. So here's the rub. These folks are still going to need some help, these wise ears, possibly even more help for the anxieties they will face. But how are they going to get that help if the very act of seeing a therapist is too intimidating to even consider? The solution, VQT. VQT represents the veritable, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em mentality. By building the entire VQT platform on a virtual platform, I'm making use of the communication modalities that my YZ population is already most familiar and most comfortable with. In order to do that, I've created video to facilitate the process and my own proprietary brand of quasi-therapy to fit neatly into the comfort zone of the wise ear. Think of VQT as a combination of YouTube videos, texts, and Snapchats that carry the same weight of traditional in-office therapy. Will the experience ever be as good as traditional in-office therapy? I don't see why not. Consider this. As a baby boomer, when texting first hit the scene, I clearly remember having this conversation with another baby boomer. It went like this. Why would anyone ever prefer to take the time to text a message on a tiny keyboard with their thumbs when all they have to do is pick up the phone and call? Texting's never going to catch on. Huh. Yeah, right. So, if you are a wise ear or know one that needs help, give it a shot. See you on the quasi side.